we are known for chasing people down the street. Well, this went beyond that. We chased him down the street, round the block. I think we ran for about 2 kilometres. And by that stage, I was in my 40s. I was knackered. The cameraman was younger than me. He was running better, and I said, I can't do that, I can't. So we commandeered a utility that was driving by. And I said to the driver, I said, we're after that bloke. And he's gone, right, get on.
Why running?
Who are you?
What's got to do with you?
4 months ago, all right?
Until they clean up
And this
their
time
yard,
the
the
come.
rats won't go
We
away.
don't know it.
Is this all hocus pocus?
Can you say, abracadabra, here's your pay?
I'm pretty fit, Abdullah. I can keep running.
Go.
It's called a current affair Australia. Is that what I know?
Have a lovely day.
Hello, I'm Lizzie Pearl.
Well, hello, Lizzie Pearl. I'm Steve Marshall.
And welcome to this episode of That's ACA. This is the podcast, the vodcast, where we take you guys behind the scenes, the making of the TV program A Current Affair, Australia's most watched and most loved A Current Affairs program.
And that's right. And who better to talk to and take us behind the scenes than one of our very own, the celebrated crime editor for A Current Affair, Simon Bouda. Welcome, Simon.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Lizzie.
Welcome.
Celebrated? I don't know. Celebrated?
We'll celebrate
Might
you.
be pushing it a bit.
But part of our reason for getting you on, Simon, is because this program is all about taking people behind the scenes of our stories, but also behind the scenes of who our reporters are, why they got into journalism, what makes them tick, and also their experiences on the road. And you've got so many of those, so many stories to tell. Are you coming up to, 50 years in journalism? Or have we passed it yet?
Well, I started when I was 15 as a copy boy and started writing stuff then. So I'm now 64, so yeah, getting close to 50.
Doing the
close to
maths.
50.
Simon, how does a copy boy become the crime editor for a national current affairs show?
You want the honest truth?
Yeah.
I cheated. I did.
Tell us more.
Back in those days, copy boys were basically you went and got coffees and you got sandwiches for the more senior journalists. We all aspired to be cadets. And to become a cadet and to then get graded, you had to get a shorthand speed of 120 words a minute. Now, I was appointed a cadet and then I had to begin my shorthand course, which was internal at the time at News Limited. It bored me to tears. I just wanted to get out there and get stories. So I didn't really do my shorthand. So I didn't achieve what I should have. But I got graded because I went to the bush. I went and worked in Tamworth and got a D grading. Elevated to a B grade and then came back to Sydney. And then I was laid off because I didn't have my speed. I hadn't complied with the union requirements. I didn't have shorthand. So I went off to a secretarial school in inner Sydney with a whole bunch of ladies and we studied hard for 8 weeks and I got my speed up. And when I say I cheated was the lecturer, the tutor who was there, who was taking us through our speeds and etc. She knew my predicament and she knew that if I didn't get my speed up, I wouldn't get my job back. So on the Friday before the test, which was going to be on the Monday, she gave me an envelope, a brown envelope, and told me to go home and study it very carefully. So I did. And I passed.
Oh, wow.
And went back to work the next day.
Yeah.
And here you are.
A little help along the way. I mean, we've all had a little help along the way, haven't we?
We have.
Now, what I really want to talk to you about, Simon, is you're the crime editor here. You have been for a long time. What is it that why did that interest you as a young journo? Why was true crime, something that you really wanted to sink your teeth into?
Well, I think we got to go back to those early days. I worked with 2 great crime reporters, Bill Jenkins and Sed Colbert, who were newspaper journalists who are now passed. And I used to watch them and watch with admiration the amount of trust that they had and the amount of contacts that they nurtured over the years. And I just thought, that's me. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And they took me under their wing and as a consequence, I did a lot of work with them and then learnt the finer art of crime reporting. And that basically comes down to, and a lot of it's lost these days, I think, but it comes down to trust. You've got to be trustworthy. And cops are funny people. You break a trust, it's gone. You're out the window.
Simon, you've covered enough stories to have your own true crime podcast, but you seem to be very busy chasing stories, raising money for charity and collecting awards.
Yeah. I wish it was collecting awards. I think I've got a couple there on the shelf.
You've got one big one.
Yeah. I guess my priorities aren't pointed towards a podcast. I did write a book not long ago called Deadline, which chronicles, I guess, a lot of the stories that would be encompassed in a podcast. Again, I think I'm probably a little bit of a dinosaur. I like the written word more so than I like the audio version of the written word. And I like to see it in paper, you know. And that's the way I grew up, and that's the way I've always been. I guess starting in newspapers drilled that into me, you know, the smell of the press and the ink and the sound of the presses when they roll and the deadlines. Fascinating times. And I still remember them so fondly. So that's where I grew up, and that's, you know, where I was. I think the move towards doing stuff for charity came out of the crime reporting, because I was dealing with so many families of homicide, families of trauma, whether it be road trauma, whether it be homicide, whether it be some other trauma. I did a lot of work with the Homicide Victim Support Group, and they are an amazing group of people, and unfortunately they support so many families of homicide, that they asked me to become an ambassador for Grace's Place, which is one of their trauma centres, which I love being, and I do organise a charity motorcycle ride for them each year where we raise a few dollars. It's just giving back, mate, I think, you know, more than anything else. You know, these people are giving me so much. When you sit opposite a family and they're opening up about their darkest moments, you know, you feel that you do owe them something.
And you were awarded an Order of Australia, and part of that was your service to victims of crime. And I just want to read this little quote from Martha Jaber, who is from the Homicide Victims Support Group. And this is about you. She said, "When they're in the most traumatic of grief, the most hardest of times of their life, he lets them know that everything they say about their loved one will be portrayed by him and his team in a way that loved ones want their family member to be honoured." As a journalist, that's what we all aim to do. We don't set out to upset people and make their worst day any worse. But how does it feel to be recognised like that? I mean, you've done your job.
I just think it's human nature. You know, people are inherently kind. We're not cruel. And so when you're dealing with someone who's gone through such a traumatic experience, you've just got to show that you are human too. You know, I've got a wife and kids at home. I'd hate to be in their position. And it was interesting. I wrote a book with a Salvation Army officer by the name of Don Woodland many years ago. It was called Picking Up the Pieces. And Don was the Sally man. He would go to all of Sydney's big traumatic events, emergencies, and he'd be there making cups of tea for the cops and the ambos and the fireys. And we'd go along and he'd be making cups of tea for us. Anyway, he was a man full of stories, and I ended up writing his book. But one thing he said to me, you know, he said, you can't walk into a home or speak to somebody who's experienced something that you haven't and say, I understand. That's one of the worst things you can do. And I've heard it so many times with other reporters walking in, I understand what you're going through. I'm sorry, you don't. Until you're in that place, you know, and that's stuck with me, you know, all the way through. I can't understand it, but you can try and walk the path with them a bit, you know.
And try and make that darkest day
a little bit easier.
I
mean, often it's cathartic, you know. You remember the Pizza Hut murder down at Sylvania many years ago. Young Michael Marslew shot dead, and I was assigned to do the death knock. Now, the death knock is one of the worst things a journalist can do, when you knock on the door of a family who's lost someone. And I knocked on this door, and Ken Marslew, his father, answered the door. And he let me into his home, and we sat down on a couch, not dissimilar to this, and he opened up about his son. It was his opportunity to tell a stranger about the love he had for his son. So it then became cathartic for him. Now, we're still great mates to this day, and that was back in 19 whatever.
So you touched on something really important there. You say you're still great mates with this gentleman, but it's not just one person. You have a reputation of keeping in contact with everyone you meet. You know, whoever's doorstep you arrive on, whoever's couch you sit on. You have a reputation for keeping in touch, and a lot of people recognise that.
Oh, look, I'd like to keep in touch with a lot more of them if I could. Harry Potter, the Channel 10 reporter, was brilliant at that. He was unbelievable. He'd send flowers on the day of the anniversary of someone's death to the family. He was the leader in that. But I think it's just important, again, it's just human nature. You maintain personal contact. You know, Stuart Diver, I covered the Thredbo landslide, and again, I wrote his book after that. And to this day, and the anniversary was just yesterday, he and I speak. He sent me a message last week, which was deep and personal, and I won't repeat it here, but it was a lovely message, you know. I just think it's part of human nature. You've got to care for each other. You know,
But you say it's part of human nature, but not all journos are like that.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah.
I know
You
that.
can move on pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it's equally important as a crime reporter to be very close with the cops, because the cops, you know, it's a difficult relationship. It's a two-way street. We can help them. They can also help us quite a lot. You have extraordinary relationships with police, and you have done for decades. How do you do that, firstly, for people that don't know? You can't just sidle up to someone and ask them, you know, to tell you what's going on. How do you do that?
Again, I come back to that word trust. They've got to trust me. I've got to trust them, that they're telling me the truth. And you build that up over time. Yeah, it only comes with time. It can't be done in an instant. Unfortunately, there are journalists and reporters out there in all media that are only there for the flash. They're there for the headline. They want to get a front page story or a lead story in a news bulletin. And sometimes they don't care who they tread over to get that. And I think that's what gives journalism a bad name. And with cops, more so.
Yeah.
Because if you've got a bad name with one area of cops, you've got a bad name pretty much across the board.
Yes.
So I guess developing friendships, and, you know, we talk about contacts, you know. Most of the people I deal with, pretty much all of them I would say, aren't just contacts, they're friends. And I mean that, you know. I mean, they'll ring me to talk personal issues, and that's fine, you know. I'll do the same with them. You know, Stuart and I, you know, I've said before, you know, he's the most amazing, Stuart Diver, who lost his wife in that terrible landslide in Thredbo. Most amazing man. He's so positive. And so when I'm down and when I'm feeling a bit low, I'll ring him and he'll lift me. Vice versa. You know, it works. And it's a friendship. Again, human nature.
Yeah.
You know?
We saw you've had many examples of that, but one example that I remember from when I was in the newsroom here at 9 with you was Kaisha Abrams. And you just so happened to be there the night the cops went into the bush and cracked the case. I mean, that was decades of hard work by you to earn that trust and for the cops to know that you weren't going to blow this for them. Talk us through that story.
Okay.
What you can tell us about that.
Yeah. It goes back a long time. It goes back probably 35 years. I think it was 86, something like that. There was a police officer who's now retired and he's a great mate. His name's Russell Oxford, one of the most respected homicide investigators this state's ever seen. And he and I met. I was a young reporter and there'd been the murder of a little boy in a house at Blacktown. And I was covering that case. And I happened to know a couple of the detectives in the homicide squad, and they had arrested the offender very, very quickly. And so we were having a beer and a pizza in the detective's office afterwards, which, you know, I don't think happens these days.
No.
And we were just sitting there. I had my feet on a desk, and in walks this young copper, and it was Russell Oxford. And he's looked at me, and I've looked at him, and we introduced each other, and we've been great mates ever since. Anyway, I'll never forget, it was the Thursday before Good Friday. And I was due to go down to a weekend away with my family for Easter. It was Thursday night, about 11 o'clock the night before. Phone's next to the bed, as it always is, and it goes off, and there on the phone was my mate Russell saying, we've got him. And I didn't know who it was on the phone to start with, because I was fast asleep, and what they were talking about. And then it suddenly dawned on me who it was and what he was talking about. And they were basically being led out to the scene by the killers. And the police able to find the body, which was amazing, and they took the accused back to the police station, whereby I managed to scramble a camera crew and we got the shot. That's the way that worked. Now, I would not normally name Russell Oxford as my informant on that, but he put his hand up for it, because next day he got a phone call from Superior saying, how did Bouda find out
How
about
was
this?
Channel 9 there?
And Russell said, well, I told him. You know, I've known him for a long time. I trust him. He's been loyal to this case. He hasn't, you know, broken any boundaries with this case another journalist had. And I told him. And so that's where that full stop ends, you know. That's why I can tell you his name.
Yeah.
There's lots I can't.
No, exactly. It is extraordinary, though, that, you know, that a relationship that you forged years before and you fostered that you were able to bring that story to viewers, because there was a lot of concern where that little girl was, and it sort of helped the community in a way.
Yeah, it did. Again, it came down to trust. Russell and I were great mates. I've been to his house. I've had dinner with him and his family. His lovely wife, Heather, passed away from cancer, unfortunately. My wife's met his family. You know, it just comes down to that confidence, that they've got confidence in you. And you only get confidence through working with people and being honest with people.
As a crime reporter, you've had a front row seat to some of the biggest crimes this state has seen. I'm talking about Anita Cobby, Ebony Simpson, Ivan Milat. You've been there for all of those stories. I mean, it's gruesome, and it's so hard to have that as your job. How do you separate from that when you get home, or can you ever separate from that?
I don't think you can ever separate from it. I'm blessed. I've got a very good family, good wife, high school sweetheart, so she's been around forever and a day, and she's grown with me through that. So she's seen my down. She knows when I'm really down. She knows how to pull me out of that by calling me a bloody idiot. But yeah, I mean, they all have different impacts. You know, things like Ebony Simpson, when you think about a 9-year-old girl thrown, or sexually assaulted, then thrown into a dam alive, tied to her school bag and things. Just horrible, you know. And, you know, Anita Cobby, one of the worst pack rape murders the state's ever seen. You know, there's just so many of them. I think you just come and you work with the realisation that you try and help these people more than anything. Like, you know, Anita Cobby's parents, Gary and Grace Lynch, wonderful, wonderful people. Peter Simpson, Ebony's dad, Christine, you know, the mum, wonderful people. And Peter and I still stay in touch. In fact, it was him who started me on the path of the Ride for Justice, which is the motorcycle ride I organised for the Homicide Victim Support Group. Because Peter and I were standing at the fence of a Ebony House, which is one of the trauma centres for the Homicide Victim Support Group, and we were there on a working bee, painting doors and all that, and we're standing at the front gate, and he was telling me about a truck convoy that went through his town, and he said, geez, it really attracted a lot of attention. And I looked at him and I said, mate, I don't drive trucks, but I ride motorbikes. Why don't we organise one? So that's how that started. That was in 2013.
Yeah. On Ivan Milat, I mean, that's a story that is still going to this day. As a part of the press pack down there in the Southern Highlands in the 90s, talk us through what that experience was like. I mean, it's like a movie, but it was real. Oh,
it was real. It was surreal, actually. I mean, you know, they found the first couple of bodies and we sort of covered that. Obviously, Ivan Milat wasn't in the picture then. And then they do more searching and they find another body. It was back in the day when Channel 9 actually had a helicopter with which we could use, which was terrific.
Which was our own.
4 o'clock in the afternoon, another body would be found. I'd be down on the chopper. We do a live cross back to the 6 p.m. news. But obviously the momentum of that, 7 victims, and Strike Force Air, or Task Force Air as it was called back then, it was made up of some very, very smart investigators. And they managed to piece it together. And Paul Onions was the key. He was the one that got away. And when they found Paul Onions, and he was able to basically give them the best leads they had, it became the operation to arrest Ivan Milat, and that was highly secretive. I was lucky enough to get some information, and I was there on the day they walked him out of his house, and it was a pretty amazing event, if you like. But there was another particularly interesting one, which I guess my job was on the line for, which goes back to the Milpera biking massacre. I don't know if you remember that. I think it was 82, Father's Day. And I was working in newspapers, and big investigation went into that. And I got information from one of the detectives that the police were going to be mounting all these raids all over Sydney on this particular day. And I've gone, okay, and that's going to be interesting. I'm going to need more than just me and a photographer to cover, multiple. It was, 40 arrests, I think, on that morning. And so I went and saw the boss of the task force, Ron Stevenson, who's now passed away. And I said, look, Ron, I know about this. And he's looked at me, he was deadly, he was going, how the hell did you find out about that? And he was filthy to start with. But then he said, right, if you know, well, then this is what's going to happen, but you can't tell anyone. And he told me the police stations that were going to be involved. I was with a photographer, worked closely with a photographer called Graham Node back in those days, and I spoke to Nodey after that meeting, and I told him, because he was going to be working with me, I said, I don't know how we're going to cover this. Anyway, so I went back and I saw the editor of the Daily Mirror, Roy Miller, and I went to his office. I said, Roy, in 2 days' time there's going to be a big job. And he said, what is it? And I said, I can't tell you. And he looked at me with that sort of look on his face. And he said, you got to tell me. I said, I can't tell you. I said, but I need 4 more reporters and 4 more photographers to cover this. And he badgered me for quite a period of time, and I didn't give it up. And to this day, I still say I didn't give it up. And he said, righto, you can have them, but if this doesn't come off, don't come back the next day.
You are in big trouble.
I was sacked. I would have been gone.
Yeah.
So I was very, very nervous that morning to make certain it did work. And it did work in the end. They got them all, and it was. They called it Operation Hard Walk. I guess when they think about Easy Rider, the classic American movie, they thought the cops being a little clever. Operation Hard Walk.
Oh, yeah.
How did your shorthand go that day?
Look, I still use the shorthand, mate. I still do to a certain degree. Yeah, it still comes in handy. I wish I knew it better now.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
I don't know shorthand. We never learnt it.
You look at some old court reporters who knew it so well, and they could get down every word. And I was just amazed by that. So, in some ways, I wish I wouldn't have cut that corner, but I guess I'm here today.
You're
and
here
I'm
now, don't
still
worry.
working. I'm looking at retirement, so it doesn't really matter.
Retirement.
You could
come
learn it
on.
in retirement.
Maybe. I could teach all you people.
Yeah,
Shorthand.
exactly.
Now, Simon, you're impeccably dressed yet again today. You are always in a suit, shirt and tie. What's the thinking behind that?
Go back to 1981 when I first started work. Shirt, suit and tie.
Yeah.
The suit came from Vintage to Paul because we weren't paid much. And we had a shirt from Woolies probably and a dirty old tie. But it was just part of the respect for the job, I think, back then. And I've just maintained it. I don't feel like I'm working unless I'm in a suit and a tie.
Do you ever get mistaken for a cop out on the beat?
Yes.
Yeah, detective?
Yeah, I've been reminded about it. That it's actually part of the curriculum down at the police academy these days. There was a murder, I can't even remember who it was, but there was a body found in a park. And I was sent out there and it was winter, and so I was wearing a suit, coat, and I had an overcoat. And the cops had blocked off one end of the park, but I've just gone for a walk, and I've walked through this tunnel and came out, and I ended up in the middle of the crime scene and walked past this young constable. He didn't look at me, didn't care. And then he came up to me, he said, can you write your name here, which was like the entry log for who's coming into the crime scene. And I wrote Simon Bouda, Off I go in, I'm walking
Wrote your
around,
name
having a
down,
look.
I love it.
Next thing, obviously someone's realised who I am, and I got booted out of there pretty quickly. But that young police officer's mistake is now part of the lectures down in Goulburn at the police academy, saying always check for ID when people are coming through.
But you couldn't have blamed him, Bouda, because sometimes you do have a lanyard around your neck.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I do remember that you used to have your phone in a holster on your belt.
I did. Alongside my 38 pistol. No, I never had a pistol.
And I just want to play something to our viewers.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So you were packing heat, were you? With your
Heat on my phone.
This is Simon Bouda's tone when he gets a text message. No word of a lie. It's the Law and Order Special Victims Unit tone. And that's when Bouda gets a text message. That's what we hear.
Oh, look, I'm probably a bit boring, and my family and my kids would definitely say that, but I'm a stickler for law and order. I mean, laws are there to be obeyed, and if you don't obey them, then there should be order.
And you did receive a very huge compliment from one of our former police commissioners, Mick Fuller, who said, I think you'd make a great police officer. I think you would have been an outstanding detective if you took that route. I mean, did that just make your life when you heard that?
No, not really. I chose a path, and the path was journalism. Admittedly, if I wouldn't have achieved a cadetship, I probably would have joined the cops because it was always my fallback.
Yeah.
My mother had dated a police officer many, many years ago, but that was through much darker days, the Bob Askin era and the corruption era. And, I'm glad that's all done and dusted. I mean, 94 when the Royal Commission came into play, it unearthed some very serious corruption in the New South Wales Police Force, and that had to be cleaned out. And it was, which was good.
Yeah.
Was there any point in your career that you ummed and ahed about jumping ship and joining the police force?
No.
No. Once you were a journo, that was it.
Yeah, because I felt what I was doing was important, you know, and once I'd established the path I was on, working with families, working with charities, working to help a little bit, I was quite happy with that. You know, I didn't need to. I mean, you know, I've met so many, and this plays on all of us, I'm sure, but I've met so many cop widows, police officers who died on the line of duty, you know, David Rickson, Bryson Anderson's family, you know, lovely people. Peter Addison and Bob Spears, Peter Forsyth. And I've got to know all these families, and I'm still in contact with all these families. I don't think I would want my family to be in that position.
Yeah.
So, you know, jumping ship might have been not the right cause.
You have been in some pretty hairy situations, though,
Yes,
Bouda, and I'm talking about your time as a foreign correspondent. Around the time of the year 2000, which was a pretty rough time on an international stage. Tell us about some of those hairy moments.
Well, it probably began before I went overseas. 99 and 2000, even here, was interesting. I mean, we had the Fijian siege of the Parliament, and we were sent over to that one, and that was quite bizarre because the whole parliamentary complex had been shut down, and the Fijian military were down the road, but it was been shut down by the rebels, and they were guarding the whole precinct, and they had the ministers as hostage up in the cabinet.
That's right.
They'd invite the journos in to do press conferences and all this sort of stuff, the rebels, and, you know, we'd go in and they'd all be standing there with the guns and all that. And it was all pretty friendly, being Fijian, you know, it's Bulla. You know, everyone was happy, you know, everyone was pretty comfortable. Anyway, this particular day, myself and the cameraman, Cameron Harvey, we decided we'd go up to the compound a bit earlier than what we would normally do, and before a lot of the other media were going up. And we went up and they were rallying. The rebels were rallying in some sort of formation. Speaking Fijian, I had no idea what they were talking about. And then all of a sudden, they marched out of the compound and made their way down to where the military blockade was. So it was the Fijian military were manning this spot because they didn't want the rebels to go past it. Anyway, we got alongside the rebels as we got close. And then once they got there, there was a bit of argy-bargy, and the rebels grabbed one of the soldiers' guns. It went off, and that set off a whole series of people firing guns.
Yeah.
And we were up against the wall, Cameron and I, and the AP cameraman and a couple of other people. And the bullets were flying across the road. I remember one went past my ear about 30 centimetres. I heard it hit the wall that's there. And the cameraman next to me, who was working with AP, Associated Press, he got shot in the arm holding his camera up like this. It went here. And he's dropped the camera, and he had a minder with him who grabbed him and dragged him out. I'm still standing there, and Cam's still standing there. And I looked down, there's the camera on the ground, and I thought, we got to get out of here. And so I yelled out, go, 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 and I grabbed the camera. And we ran down the road until we got past, like, it was a wall all the way down. You couldn't get anywhere. Then there was a break in the wall, in the bushes, and we jumped through that, and we landed knee-deep in an open septic tank.
Oh, my God.
Bulla.
Up to here, bulla.
In
There
the
was a whole
ship.
lot of bulla. So I still had the camera, you know. Anyway, we got out of the bulla and went back to the hotel and threw our stuff away. And I had the camera, and I've gone to the AP producer and I said, look, this is your camera, you might want it. How's he going? And they'd taken him to hospital. He was okay, the cameraman. Unbeknownst to me, it was still rolling. So it had rolled the whole time from the time it hit the deck and me running along into the bulla and, you know, and the shots. And so
well
the vision went around the world.
Well done, yeah.
Because AP was a wire service.
Yeah.
And they were very thankful that I picked the camera up because it would have been trashed otherwise.
Yes.
So that I think that was one of the motives that, and that and East Timor, because I covered East Timor in the first instance of when the Intercept went in. That got me the position of London, working in the Europe Bureau for Channel 9 News. And yes, it was a very tumultuous time. You've got to think about September 11 happening. And we had Intifada, we had so much. We had the weapons of mass destruction supposedly littering Iraq. You know, we had Pakistan, we had Afghanistan. It was full on. It was full on.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we think it's a dangerous time now, which it is, but we forget there's a long history.
Oh.
And you had a front row seat to it. Did you ever fear for your life when you're in those situations? I know it's hard now to sort of look back, but were there a time when you thought, I'm in the trouble here?
Look, there was there's always times when you think about it. After September 11, Dylan Robertson, the cameraman from Channel 9, and I were dispatched down to Jerusalem, Israel, because we figured when we were dispatched, we were in London, so obviously we didn't really know who was behind it. It was all very new. It was all happening so quickly. So we flew down and we went straight to Ramallah because we knew that, I think, was it a Friday? No, one might not have been. Anyway, we knew that there'd be some action in Ramallah, so we go to Ramallah. Sure enough, there's a protest in the street, and they're all shooting the AK-47s into the air and waving posters of this bearded guy wearing a keffiyeh. I didn't know who that bearded guy was at that stage. Anyway, we went back to the feed point, which is at APTN, and we were feeding our vision back to Australia of this protest because we figured it had to be something to do with what had happened. And all the other journalists from all over around the world were gathering around us going, how'd you get that footage? Where'd that come from? And we said, we got it in Ramallah. And they said, we were told we couldn't go there. We'd be shot if we did. So Dylan and I go, no, dumb Australians, we'll just send it back. It's there, we've got the pictures.
Exclusive.
She'll be right.
That night I got a phone call from the executive producer at News here in Sydney to say that Peter Harvey in Canberra, who was our correspondent down there, had received information from the embassy saying Simon Bouda and Dylan Robinson are in a whole lot of trouble. They might want to get out of where they are because
you weren't meant to be there.
We weren't meant to be there, and we'd broken from strict rules. So the threat was we were going to be shot. So we discussed it between ourselves, and we decided. I spoke to a number of. You had fixers in those countries who would help you out, and I spoke to the fixers from the Israeli side and from the Arab side, and they both said, no, we don't know of any drama, so we just stayed. So it was fine. But, that was interesting. And, obviously, the other one, which I guess we got through by the skin of our nose. Again, I was with Dylan Robertson, and it was as the American troops were making their way towards Kabul. Mm-hmm. And all the media had gathered in Pakistan, in Peshawar, which is a frontier town up on the border, because that's the way you could get in via the Khyber Pass into Kabul. And all media, including us, wanted to get there before the Yanks because we wanted to be there when the Yanks came in and freed Afghanistan, made it a democratic country. Well, okay. So there were ways and means that you could contact what they call smugglers, because there's a lot of badness in that town. You go to the market and there's guns for sale. You can buy anything there. And we arranged with some smugglers that we'd be picked up at 5 a.m. the next morning, and we'd be put into a van and driven across the border, because you couldn't get visas from the Taliban. They wouldn't give them to us. Across the border down into Kabul. Anyway, so we go to bed that night, and my phone goes, and Paul Fenn, who was our news director here in Sydney, was on the other end. Excuse me. And he said, I'm not happy. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're not going. And I said, what? I said, we've got the arrangements. Everything's in place. Yeah. It's all good. He said, no, I don't feel comfortable. And I said, well, Dylan and I have spoken about it. We're happy to do it. He said, well, if you do it, you won't have our backing.
Wow.
Which was, I think he was saying in a very nice way.
Yeah.
So Dylan and I spoke again, and we decided not to go. We were pretty angry about the whole situation, but,
you want to go.
We wanted to be there. The next morning, we woke up and we decided we'd go to the border area where there was a number of refugee centres, and we knew of an Australian doctor working there, so we thought, we'll go and do a story on the Australian doctor, who was a lovely bloke. And our phones started going off while we were shooting that, and it was all our colleagues in Islamabad ringing to say, you were right, you were right, you were right. And I said, yeah, why, what's happened? And apparently a convoy of smugglers that morning had been ambushed by the Taliban going over the border. Wasn't the convoy we were going to be on. We were going to be on the convoy immediately after. So there was a number going through. And for foreign journalists from all over the world, including Harry Burton, who was an Australian cameraman working for Reuters at the time, were marched up the side of the hill and executed. Oh. So, everyone we went, okay. I called Paul Fenn since then Sir Paul, or Saint Paul, because, he probably saved our bacon,
Good call.
It was hairy situations, but I guess when you're in those situations, you weigh up the pros and cons, and we weighed them up and we felt we were okay. Yeah. We might have been okay. We might have got to Kabul. Don't know.
Sliding doors moment.
That's it.
Yeah. You spoke about technology there for a minute, Simon. You started off doing shorthand as a cadet. Here you are in a podcast studio. AI's knocking on the door. Was there any particular moment throughout your career that your eyes just went wide when a new technology was introduced?
I think it was when you said to me last week, can you come and do the podcast with us? I've gone, what's a podcast? No. Look, mobile phones.
Yeah.
We didn't have them. Back in the day when we were filing stories for newspapers, it was telephone booths.
Yeah.
So how would that work? Tell us.
Literally a telephone booth.
But you had pages?
Yeah, we had pages.
Yeah.
So that was, the Motorola pages. They were quite long. They fit really well into a schooner glass when you...
When you didn't want to be contacted.
When you didn't want to be contacted.
There's a tip.
They didn't sound too good after that.
So you get a page from the Chief of Staff, please call.
Yeah.
You
and
find
then
the
call.
nearest
Yeah.
phone booth.
Absolutely. That's exactly the way it was. And then if you were filing, especially if you're doing... back in those days, we had the newspapers were very, very competitive, much more so than now. You had 2 afternoon dailies, you had 2 morning dailies. The 2 afternoon dailies have 5 editions. So the first edition will be going on print at about 7 a.m, hit the streets by 10, and then there'll be editions all the way through and constantly updating stories. So the competition was great. And I remember, you might be in a country town and there's only one telephone booth. And it has been known that the telephone line has been cut by journalists to stop other journalists
After you
filing.
filed.
I never did it. I never did it.
So what, there would have been a conga line of journos waiting for their time
Pretty
in
much.
the phone booth.
Yeah,
Down the
pretty
street.
much. And, it's just the way it was. But, then we moved to mobile phones. And as you remember, there used to be the bricks.
Yeah.
And the battery used to be literally the size of 2 house bricks.
Sling it over your shoulder. Remember that?
Yeah. And that was modern technology. I just can't believe how quickly it's all gone. Now we can shoot footage on here and have it going to air virtually live.
Yeah.
So how would you get pictures back in the 80s and 90s?
Well, I can only talk newspapers for that period. Well, I can talk TV, I suppose, as well. But for newspapers, we had what we call a gram machine, which was a machine that you plugged into the telephone line, and it had a drum. And the photographer, we'd actually set up a dark room in a hotel room, right? So in the bathroom, you tape it all up. He'd print his photographs there his or hers, in the dark room, then put the photograph on the drum, plug the machine into the wall socket, and hit go. And what it would do, you'd dial a number, obviously, and what it would do would change the light signal to an audio signal and reproduce that photograph at the other end.
Wow.
Wow.
How about that?
It was really quite clever. It was black and white, obviously.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be
Yeah.
doing in colour. And the quality wouldn't be as good as the original, but if you wanted the picture there in a hurry...
Yeah.
it
From the
was
other
there.
side of the world.
Yeah, from the other side of the world.
I remember back when I was a little journo out at Win TV, we had to put our tapes in the post.
Yeah, yeah.
And would get them the next day in
Absolutely,
the next town.
yeah. Well, we used to have, what do they call them? Even from overseas. Back in the day, they'd be sending tapes back from overseas in the bags. I think the overnight bag. Overnight bag, it was called.
Yeah.
Put it on a plane, fly it back.
And now it's so
It's changed.
extraordinary. It's in an instant. Has that put more... Is there more pressure on now as a journo because the technology is so good we can do more, or was it more difficult back then because you were so limited?
Oh, I think both eras have their own difficulties. One of the big difficulties I see in the modern age is accuracy, and that comes down to the speed of reportage, and it can happen so quickly. You wonder about how factual something might be, and that's a real danger. So I think that's a problem now. Back then, it had its issues, but you worked with them. That's what you knew.
Yeah.
You didn't know anything
You don't
better.
know
There wasn't
anything.
anything better.
Yeah.
You just had to do it that way.
And now I think, back in the day, you spoke about death knocks a little while ago. It's horrible for everyone involved, but you had to go and physically ask a family for a photograph of a loved one. Now you control Facebook and just get a photo, which I think can be more distressing for a family
Absolutely.
because they don't know.
Because they've got no control.
Yeah.
And that's one of the dangers of social media.
Journalism is a tough gig these days. What's your advice to young ones trying to get into the industry? What's your...
Probably be true to yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to walk away from a story, or once you've completed a story, with your head held high. And I haven't always done that. There's been stories that I've done and I've walked with my head down. And I think, I didn't do that right. I shouldn't have done that. But so you've got to be true to yourself. And you will be pushed and pulled by your superiors to do all sorts of different things. And sometimes it's very hard to say no, but often you'd be better off saying no for your own reputation going forward than saying yes and agreeing to everything that they tell you to do.
Yeah.
I think that'd be the best advice. And be true to yourself, but be honest with the people you're dealing with. And it's not just the people we're interviewing, it's the people who are out there listening to this or who are watching us on A Current Affair nightly. They want to trust you and believe you. So don't give them anything else but that. And if you do that, I think then you can hold your head up high and leave every day with your head up high.
Yeah,
and you do, my friend.
No,
you
I
do.
try. I
You
try.
do.
Not often.
We want to end on one of the highlights from the archives.
This might be a low light. It's not a funny feeling, not a highlight.
It involved you, a chase,
Oh, my
some
goodness.
Nigerian scammers.
Well, look,
Do tell, please, Simon Bouda.
Steve Marshall's the king of scammers. But he wasn't around at this time, so he probably would have done exactly the same thing. No, it was a Nigerian, I forget what it was, I think it was a Nigerian scammer who was ripping off, Australians. And we'd arranged I became a victim and arranged a meeting with him in a car park out near the airport. I think it was Krispy Kremes
Yeah.
or KFC, one of the two. Anyway, so I'm waiting there and we've got the camera crew nearby and I'm inside and I'm watching through the windows and I see this Nigerian gentleman coming towards me wearing a suit, looking pretty sharp,
Yeah.
Anyway, he comes in and then the camera crew sort of comes out and this guy could run. He took off like a rabbit. Now, in A Current Affair, we are known for chasing people down the street. Well, this went beyond that. We chased him down the street, round the block. I think we ran for about 2 kilometres. And by that stage, I was in my 40s. I was knackered. The cameraman was younger than me. He was running better, and I said, I can't do that. I can't. So we commandeered a utility that was driving by. And I said to the driver, I said, we're after that bloke. And he's gone, right, get on. So we're on the back of this ute,
Yeah.
hurtling up the street, and I'm hanging onto the... The guy still got away. Still got away. Never got the
Still got
interview.
away.
Still got away. Mr. McCoy, we're here on behalf of Mr. Don Walker. Do you know Mr. Don? Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, where are you going? Excuse me, can I see your diplomatic passport? Where's your paperwork? Where's the boxes? Where are you going?
They were off like the wind until we cornered them in a nearby street, and then they were off again.
Stop. You can't keep running, mate. Stop. Well, let's just stop and talk to us.
But he kept running
No. I don't know who you guys are.
and running.
Hold on. Jump in the back.
What are you doing to me?
So we commandeered a passing utility. All we wanted were some answers.
I tell you what, he can run this bloke. Okay, go up. Mr. McCoy, just stop. Just stop right where you are.
But he takes off again. Frankly, I just couldn't keep up.
Well, there goes Mr. McCoy, running up the street. If he's got nothing to hide, why is he running so hard? I guess we'll just have to wait and see if he pops his head up somewhere else.
Commandeered a ute.
But going above and beyond for the story.
Yeah, I think it got to the point where I didn't want to be beaten by this bloke,
Yes.
Yeah.
but I think
It
he
got
won.
personal.
I think he won. He's probably kicking back in Nigeria, telling the same story to
Yeah.
some podcast over there right now.
Exactly, having a good old laugh.
Parallel universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, Simon, it's been so good to chat to you.
No,
I've
no
worked
problem.
with you for many years and I've always admired your work.
Thank you.
Your empathy, your kindness, and it's been so great chatting
You're
to
making
you.
me blush,
Thank
but
you.
thank you.
Yeah, and look, please do go back through the archives and
Simon Bouda's
Yeah.
archives.
Yeah,
we could start a whole
there's some
new
beauties.
YouTube
Yeah,
channel.
that's right. Some fantastic stories. Simon, you're a remarkable journo, an even better colleague. So thanks for joining us. And to people out there, you can catch all those stories, all Simon's stories, and other stories
On
on all our
YouTube,
socials. Yeah,
9
YouTube.
Now.
Yeah.
get in touch with us on our socials. If you've got a question for us or Simon, send it through to ACA at 9.com.au. We'd love to answer your questions. We hope we've asked some good questions, but if you've got some others, please let us know.
Send them through, Simon, it's been a pleasure.
Done. We've only skimmed the surface.
We'll have to get you back for another one.
Thanks very much.